Jeremiah Gardner here with the Hazelden Betty Ford Foundation. I'm with Ryan Hampton from Mobilize Recovery. Hey, Ryan.
Good to be here. Good to see you. Back on
Yeah,
Zoom, back on virtual.
yes, but it was great to see you in person out on the Mobilize Recovery Across America bus tour. Saw you in Minneapolis and a few other places. What a whirlwind month. I was just excited to sort of check in with you and get your reflections on what I think turned out to be a real epic advocacy journey. So thanks for joining me.
Oh, it's great to be here. It's even better to be back home. We were on the road for 31 days, traveled about 10,400 miles, crossed over 25 states plus the District of Columbia, hosted 37 events, over 12,000 people that came out to engage in person, reached 1 million households through our partnerships with iHeart and Meta. I think distributed a little bit over 10,000 naloxone kits, 11,000 fentanyl test strips, registered, nearly 4,000 people in recovery to vote in their states, all in 31 days. So, you know, it was ambitious. It was ambitious. I think, looking back though, and I'm still kind of in this decompression mode. Um, I think it was necessary. I think it was timely. I think it was important. Um, but I've never felt more hopeful, about where we could go if we do it together in the recovery advocacy space. One of the things that just fascinates me and I'm so grateful for is, getting out into communities and really seeing all the new people, new folks, new names, new faces, new voices, new organizations, and engaging them in a unique and different way, because I think that's how we continue to build, upon the gains in the recovery space that have been made for so many decades. We need new people and we need new energy, and that's what I saw, and just filled with an incredible amount of hope and positivity about the direction we're all collectively headed in.
One metric I didn't hear you say is how many hugs were there?
Oh goodness. can't even can't even quantify. Many, many. And you know I we left Vegas on September 5th, and I remember September 4th, Sunday night, September 4th, the day before Labor Day, kind of going through all the stops and the registrations and the Eventbrites. I mean, I was nudging you, every other day about how it was coming to Minneapolis, and I thought to myself, well, this was a valiant effort, and I was already starting to like kill it before it even started. I was like, this was a valiant effort. The community came together and partners came together, and we've done something extraordinary, but I just don't know if people are going to show up. I just don't know if this is the time. I just don't, all the fears and doubts going through my head. And Sean, my fiance, who runs the RCO here in Nevada, Foundation for Recovery, that was the launch event. And I was like, Sean, how many people do you think are going to come out to this? He's like, I don't know. He's like, you're just going to have to show up and see. And I'm thinking, what, like 75, 100, and it was like nearly 700 people who showed up. And that first day, that energy sustained itself for 31 days to the very end. I mean, people just came out like I've never seen before. Not just to sign the bus, but to engage with partners, to learn organizing tactics, to participate in public narrative trainings, to have roundtables with policymakers, just have conversations around recovery-friendly workplaces. I mean, it was extraordinary, and it was only possible um, because we engaged the community and the communities we were in. They were the ones that really made this happen. We just showed up with a bus.
What do you think is different about this moment in time? You referred to it a little bit that you think maybe made communities so eager to participate.
I think it's almost the reimagining of what Recovery Month is and could be and should be. I think that was what I think really mobilized, for lack of a better term, more people than at least I've seen before. Traditionally, Recovery Month was always kind of billed as, awareness and celebration, which it is. Purple ribbons, proclamations, things like that. And we welcome and want all of that as well, but it's more about action, a month of action. What is it that we can be doing to do our jobs better, but to also help our policymakers do their jobs better, and to maybe meet some of those proclamations and uh, good wishes and words that we get throughout the month of September and turn it into meaningful policy.
I joked myself during Recovery Month that Recovery Month isn't that great for recovery a few times because it's just such a busy month. What did you do to stay well physically and emotionally during those 5 weeks?
I think a lot of it was my my mother taught me something. It's called the P's. Proper planning prevents piss poor performance. And but that has stuck with me from day one. And I think in my recovery too, and particularly in the last couple of years, have uh kind of subscribed to this tenant that there's only so much you can do, and then you need to go out to plan, and then you need to just go out and do it and let the chips fall where they may. So part of that whole September 4th, you know, thing I was going through around just kind of accepting things as where they were or are was just kind of preparing myself to be like, no matter what happens when we leave tomorrow, we are going to make the best of this and we're going to make it work, whether it's one person or 1,000 people that show up, no matter where we go. We're going to make the best of it for those people who show up. And I think just preparing myself to just realize before we launched that we had spent a good 8 months planning for this. And now it was time to go out and make it happen. Um, I was incredibly intentional about my sleep. Um, you know, I, I probably got more sleep while I was traveling than I did for the 6 months leading up to the tour. Was just intentional about, 7 hours minimum a night. I ate well. I stayed in touch with my community, both within my personal recovery and my friends and my family and Sean. I had scheduled out time for those conversations. And I tried to do something, in most cities that I was at that wasn't necessarily related to the bus, and I think that kept me pretty centered. But the one thing that it was different in the sense that like I wasn't going back to back in cities and just like giving talks or showing up at events. Every time we left a city, there was like this moving monument of why we were doing this. And I made it a practice that each night, at the end of the day, so maybe it was 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, and the bus pulls up, to the Holiday Inn or the, La Quinta that we're staying at that night. I just would do a walk around it, and there were stories, that if you didn't, pay attention or really spend time with it, you could miss. And I would see things on it, like 50 days sober, 10 days sober, keep carrying the hope, uh, parents and siblings who had lost a loved one, just writing small messages on it. And it, kept me self-aware of the impact that was being created, um, and also the hope that it was bringing to folks. And I took it very seriously, that this meant a lot to some folks, and we needed to take care of ourselves so that we could keep it on the road.
Where's the bus now? What comes of the bus and the wrap and all those signatures?
What a great question. The bus just landed back home, which is in Los Angeles. It got there yesterday. Um, it is in the process of being dewrapped. Sadly, there was no way to preserve the wrap. just because it's practically impossible. But we did document as much of it as we can in photography and videography, and we spent a lot of time in Spokane, our last stop, to make sure that we're capturing a lot of that, so that we've got it to archive.
You had great photographers, great videographers with you the whole way. It was kind of amazing to see you producing documentaries at every stop. Incredible, really. And are there grander plans for all of that media that you can
I don't
talk
know
about?
yet. I mean, we're gonna do something with it. The main goal was to get it out and distributed as quickly as possible, which I think we hit that mark during recovery month. You know, within 24, sometimes 48 hours of a stop, we had the recap up. And again, I've been blown away by the metrics from it so far. I mean, combined, it's had over 1 million views, and I think in terms of unique individuals, it's well over 400,000. So I mean, it served its purpose in terms of getting out there, but there will be some sort of digital home for it that'll live in perpetuity, so that people can always revisit or relive it if they'd like.
That's great. And just a couple more questions. You've been really at the center of America's dialogue around addiction recovery for 6 years or so. What progress have you seen made? What does Mobilize Recovery sort of represent in terms of the progress we've made and maybe the progress we haven't made?
Yeah. I think the biggest, goalpost in terms of progress is there's more people with lived experience who are being taken seriously. I think, there are so many different, policy items that need to be taken on. But 6 years ago, rarely would you see people in recovery, or particularly those who are new in recovery, showing up to have like meaningful seats at some decision-making tables. They would be invited to, be a part of a panel, or be a part of a press conference or something. But we now see people in recovery who are serving an elected office, some as high as United States cabinet secretary and mayors, and folks running for Congress who are in recovery. Myself, I had a pretty powerful position on the negotiating front for the Purdue settlement. I mean, like, we're seeing real recognition. I think a lot of that has helped push some of the policy items that we're seeing, right? So the 10% set aside, folks talk about, well, that's been, years coming, but it also, it has been, but it's also been the result of, the addiction recovery appointments project, that we did with the Biden administration. And we also did some of it with the Trump administration, where we worked really hard to get people in recovery appointed to very high level government positions in the administration, who then turned around and advocated for this 10% set aside and explained to Office of Management and Budget why it was important. So like we have empirical data, empirical evidence that shows, like, when we have people in recovery or those with lived experience, serving in these positions, that we have favorable outcomes for the recovery community. I think it's also shown, though, in terms of, challenges that we have ahead of us. And I saw it, front and center on Main Street for 31 days. I think it's important for us to recognize there are differences. The entire recovery space does not hold hands and sing kumbaya all day long around what some of the solutions can be. I think that it's important that we celebrate our differences and recognize them, and also have very clear drawn lanes on what we do and what we do not do. I will tell you one of my fears, and this was, I think, very clear to me as we were traveling the country and meeting with different stakeholder groups, is some of the forward-thinking policy that we've had, some of the gains that we've seen over the last predating me, right, over the last 20 years, 30 years in terms of drug policy, some of the unity and bipartisan spirit around this issue, we're at a risk of losing. I think if the recovery space doesn't kind of get their act together on, making sure we don't return to a failed war on drugs when it comes to policies specific to fentanyl. We're seeing it play out right now. A lot of the scare tactics that we've seen used with crack and other substances, there's this knee-jerk response to always go to, refelonizing or recriminalizing based on a substance. And I think that we really need to start to get our ducks in a row on that messaging, because I think a lot of the gains we've made could be taken away, overnight, if we don't start to strategize around that.
Do you think about when you retire what the world, in an idea, if everything you wanted to happen happened, what it would look like?
Universal health care. I mean, I tell universal healthcare, low barrier housing, employment opportunities for those coming out of the justice system, and those in recovery and in early recovery. I think these are large. So I have a friend of mine who's running for office right now, who's in recovery, and is like, I can't just talk about recovery all day long. I'm like, absolutely you can. It's just how you talk about it. I'm like, when you talk about poverty, you're talking about recovery. When you talk about, child care tax credits, you're talking about recovery. When you talk about, reproductive rights, you're talking about recovery. When you talk about taxes, you're talking about recovery. When you talk about healthcare, I mean, like every single big ticket, hot political issue right now, these are like, I believe, like embedded within our social determinants of health when it comes to our recovery outcomes.
Well, as a person in recovery and somebody who lost a loved one to addiction as well, and I'm just really inspired by your energy, and I appreciate it. I have one last question, and that is, what's next for Mobilize Recovery? You're always thinking of the next idea. I feel like what is next, Ryan?
We're always thinking of the next idea. I could tell you what's absolutely next, though, is a little bit of rest for everyone on the team. We're regrouping first week of November and gonna have that conversation, but I can guarantee you the momentum will keep moving forward.
Well, thanks for your time. Thanks for Mobilize Recovery Across America, and I look forward to finding out more.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremiah.
You bet.